Hey everyone, my name is Prism, and welcome back to Prism's Media Spotlight. Today I'm going to be completing my mission, sort of, for watching every single Mission Impossible film with Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Now I know what some of you might be saying, where's your Mission Impossible Fallout review? Don't worry, I will get to that, hopefully this weekend, but I didn't have time to watch it without having watched 5 hours of film in one day. So, yeah, I will be getting to it, but it will probably not be till later this weekend or after finals. Anyways, I'm going to be reviewing the latest and final supposed installment in the franchise, The Final Reckoning. Now, I actually recorded a kind of out-of-theater reaction. It was pretty much like 30 minutes after I got out of the cinema, but I deleted the recording by accident when clearing files. So, we're going to redo this, and I'm wearing a hood because I don't feel like doing my hair early in the morning. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, there are going to be spoilers, but I will warn you when the spoilers are going to happen. But let's get into my general feelings. So, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning to me is meant to be the final installment in Mission Impossible. But I don't think it's a great final installment. I think that the film is really let down by some poor decision making and some terrible pacing. I feel like the first act is really well paced, the third act is all rightly paced, but the second act just slogs to a halt. The film is so long, it's 2 hours and 51 minutes, and while there are really enjoyable sequences, I find it at times really boring. Now, it isn't as boring as I found Rogue Nation, but it just really needs, some better editing. There are sequences in here, like the submarine sequence, which isn't really a spoiler, it's in the trailer. And it just goes on forever with, he's got to go to this spot, and then he has to go to this spot, and then he has to go to this spot, and meanwhile we're cutting back and forth between other scenes. And it just feels really slow and monotonous. It's just overly badly paced. Now, the plot of Final Reckoning obviously is picking up where the last one left off, with the Entity slowly taking over the world, and Ethan Hunt and his team having to go against the Entity. Now, there's some really good ideas in here, and I'll talk about those more in spoilers, but it does not fix the fact that this is a horribly paced film. And yeah, can I say much? I'll say this. I do think the airplane sequence is great. I do think it does go on a bit too long. I think that if this were to be the last one, you would feel either way about it. It is disappointing in some regards. It's a really slow finale for an action-packed franchise, but it also does feel like they really cared about the franchise and were trying to give a good send-off. But some of the ways they tried to send things off was not good. There's just a lot of problems with the film. I did enjoy it. I do think it is a fun installment. I do think I would watch it again. But I don't think I'd rush to the theaters to see it again because it's just so long. It's, like I said, almost 3 hours long, plus all the movie theater trailers. It's just a really long movie-going experience. And I know that you don't want to rush the finale, but this is one of those where it feels like someone at the studio needed to say you need to pick up the pace a little bit. Because there's just character decisions or character plot beats that just don't... There's just things that don't go anywhere. They try to set up important moments, and then they just don't do anything with them. It's just really rough in some spots. I did enjoy it overall. I do think it's a really fun film when it's actually well-paced. I do think there are some great action sequences in here. Sorry, my words. But I really don't think this is the finale that Mission Impossible needed. I think that Dead Reckoning's honestly a better finale. That one's got some issues too, but it's way better paced. There's really fun stunt sequences. There's great character moments. Is there? Well, I guess people say the films are more stunts than plot, but This one tries to have some character moments, and just some of them don't work. But like I said, I'm going to get into spoilers, so let's go full spoiler mode. Alright, so Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning is an interesting film. It is set a few months after Dead Reckoning, maybe a year, I don't remember how long. But basically, the world has become slowly corrupted by the Entity. The Entity has gained access to nuclear launch codes and is wanting to nuke the entire world. Now, of course, this kind of has some problems, because why does the Entity want to nuke the world? I guess because it wants to create a better one? But that's a really weak argument, because you're basically saying, hey, a computer wants to nuke everyone, and there's no emotional reason why, where the Syndicate in MI5, for example, may have an actual purpose, or Obi and Davies, or other characters, whether or not they do, it's just like you can actually get into their mindset. You can get into them emotionally. And whether they're right or wrong, you at least can physically feel like there's some purpose for this. Where the Entity is just trying to be God, as they say. Okay, so your villain's now computer. That's literally your villain for the final film. But it doesn't stop there. Gabriel is meant to basically be the Entity's messenger, but he gets basically sidelined because the Entity basically says, like, oh, he's failed me. Ethan Hunt, you will now fulfill the mission, or whatever. I do like what they try to do by saying that the Entity's source code, or how the Entity was built, was part of the Rabbit's Foot. I think that's a really, really smart callback, going all the way back to MI3 and saying, hey, you remember when you saved your wife and you didn't know why you were getting this object, other than saving her, like what its purpose was? It was actually for this. And I think that's... Sorry, zipping my jacket up. I think that's a really interesting premise. I think that's really interesting that they're going back and doing that, and I do really like that because it kind of ties it all together. One of the issues this film has is literally flashing back all the other films like 5 times. It's once at the beginning where there's the message with the President of the United States, then again, and then again. And you know, I don't mind them doing it once or twice. I think it kind of works because it's trying to be like a send-off for all the films. But doing it like 3 times is a little bit excessive, especially when literally the conversation at the beginning is so focused on, hey, here's this imagery, while we're talking about all the things Ethan Hunt has done. I mean, it works, but it just also feels a little bit like you're trying to pull at nostalgia. When, ironically, these films have never really done that before. Like, a lot of these films are very genuine. They aren't like Star Wars where they're like 30 years apart. But then again, this franchise is over 30 years old. And then you have the television series. This franchise has been around a long time. I also like... Okay, so I like that part at the beginning. I like that Gabriel's trying to basically tell Grace, hey, you shouldn't trust him because this happened with Julie. That felt really cool as a fan because I'd watched MI3 and I'm like, oh, I get this. But there's other things too, like, just... Okay, so they kill off Luther in the first act of the film. Why on earth are we killing him in the first act? I understand this is meant to be a huge story, and this is technically like maybe the 4th act, but it feels really, really disingenuous. Not even disingenuous, that's not the right word. It feels really like they had to kill someone off. Because they're basically like, oh, you need to disable the spawn, but suddenly he's in a hospital bed. Why is he in a hospital bed? Like, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes unexplained. So of course, he dies because he's sacrificing himself for the city. It feels really lame. I'd rather he die in a gunfight or in an actual, like, stunt trying to stop the world or something. But instead they kill him in the first act. And they actually try and make Benji basically be the mission leader later in the film. Because that's a whole thing, too, where they separate the whole team. It's basically Ethan Hunt on his own, which I think is a little bit warranted because he has always stated that, like, he's not willing to let his team die and he tries to do things on his own. But he does his things on his own for, like, over an hour and a half, it feels like. He's basically going for the Sebastopol, and so he gets an aircraft carrier after talking to the US. But, like, he doesn't have his team with him. And that makes sense. But then they do something really confusing where when he's trying to explain to the aircraft carrier captain or whatever, I forget her role, they're trying to cut between two different sequences. You have Benji and the team talking about the plan, and you have Ethan and the team talking about the plan. Or Ethan and the captain. And I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to show you what's going on instead of just having him talk. But it really feels confusing. It really feels poorly done because you think at some points that they're in the same room. So I really don't like that editing choice. I think it's cool, but also it's, like, very confusing to the audience. I think also that the whole submarine sequence, it was a little bit long. I get the point. You're trying to top Rogue Nation, but you didn't need to make a 45-minute sequence, which is basically, like, extended because you're cutting back and forth from things. I didn't mind the whole subplot with Benji and the team having to go to this family in the Arctic to try and get to the coordinates, and then you have the whole Russian enemy crew attack them, and then there's a big fight in the house and everything catches on fire. I didn't mind that, except it feels a little bit like you're trying to have an action scene. Because what would have happened if they didn't attack? What would have happened? You would have had to have gone anyways to get to the coordinates, but you still have everyone with you. Like, literally, there was nothing that didn't happen from not having that sequence. It was just, let's have a huge fight sequence, and it kind of meant nothing. But also, I will say that, you know, I do appreciate them trying to make Benji the mission leader, but I don't think it's fully earned. I really don't think it's fully earned or paid off. He does a good job at it, I think, but I feel like it could have been built up a lot more. Also, yes, I do realize I need to shave, but I made the joke of, oh, I'll do this when I'm done with all the films, so each episode, my beard will be slowly progressing. I guess, like, my history with all the Mission Impossible films. Anyways, no, so I do think there are interesting ideas in here. I do think that, you know, there are a lot of really long scenes. That's just the whole issue. Everything's so long, and there's things that feel like they could have been done a lot better. And, yeah, you would say, well, what about the third act? Well, the third act has a lot of problems. Because we go from Ethan confronting Gabriel, because he's got to give him the thing, the disc thing, in order to basically get him to insert it and then to catch the entity in a split second. And I do really like that they give Grace that job. I think that was smart because she is a thief, so she's the best at pickpocketing kind of thing. Like, oh, you can pickpocket, so you know the timing. I do think that was cool. But yeah, basically it goes from, we gotta give Gabriel this thing, we gotta let him do this, to, never mind, we're gonna go kill Gabriel, and let's not just kill Gabriel on a train or something like that, let's have like a 15-minute flight sequence. Now, I don't mind Tom Cruise doing flight stunts, and I don't mind the sequence, except that it's really long, and it's kind of boring. It just felt kind of boring because it took so long. And then it felt like when Ethan Hunt actually got on top and got upper hand of Gabriel, like, it wasn't too hard to defeat him. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying, because it was, but it also just kind of feels lame. I would have rather had a hand-to-hand fight, which the franchise has done notoriously. And you can say, like, well, this is the sixth act in a, like, you know, 6-act structure, like, you know, this is the ultimate ending to everything. They already had their big train fight. But I don't know, you could have done something fun with it. Instead, it's just aerial gymnastics for like 15 minutes. I also think that the ending is a little bit too long. For one, I don't know why they tried to give Benji an injury. They were trying to create drama, but I think it would have been more impactful if he died and they were only able to save him for just enough time. But instead, nope, he's perfectly fine. And the ending of the film is basically all the characters meeting up in the square and looking at each other, and that's it. And they take a very long time to look at each other. They take like 5 minutes. Because Ethan Hunt walks around, they look at each other, then they look at each other again, and they're like, do you get the emotion? And then they kind of look at each other again, and then walk off. It just kind of doesn't make for a great finale. It just kind of doesn't make for a good send-off. I do like that they leave the door open-ended to another Mission Impossible, where they could do one if they really wanted to, or they couldn't. By just having the Mission Impossible theme kind of play, and the world now being safe from the entity. But also at the same time, it's like, you should have been more conclusive. I know they kind of concluded Julie's story in Fallout, but I think it would have been really cool if what they did in this one was they let him go have his life with Julie. Now, that would bring up questions like, well, what was he doing with these other women during his time on the Mission Force? You know, like, hanging out with them, having romantic relationships. But I feel like you could have made it work, but maybe that would have felt cheap. I don't know. I feel like this could have been a way better ending. I feel like they kind of dropped the ball with this. Like, someone was not telling them, you need to cut. It just went on way too long. It just got boring to a point. And that's really unfortunate because this could have been an awesome finale. But instead, the final installment in an action-based franchise is a slog. Overall, I do think it is a fine conclusion. I'd honestly say meh about it because it's just, like, it's got cool moments, but it's a really slow film. I'd honestly give it a 7.5 out of 10. And that's not really good when I've given some of the other films way higher. Of course, not every finale is going to be perfect, but it is a really, really slow film. And I really don't like that they separate the team. I really don't like some of the editing decisions. I just think that the Final Reckoning could have been way better. And if they went ahead and did a Mission Impossible 9, and if it was way better than this, that could be a better send-off. But it feels like this one has to be the send-off because they've already killed someone. So, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Would I recommend it? If you want to go see it in cinemas, go ahead and see it. Go see it in the biggest screen possible. It is Mission Impossible. You know, it isn't one that you really want to stream. It's one that you want to go see on the big screen. But, yeah, it's just got a lot of problems. That's my honest thoughts, though. Thank you guys for watching this series. Once I watch Fallout, I will do a full ranking of every single film, from worst to best, in my opinion. But, thank you guys. Bye for now.